Okay, so we just established up here that 180 degrees is equal to pi radians. What we want to do now is talk about, all right, we're familiar with degree measure. We're just learning about this radian measure. It's a new way to measure the size of an angle. What we have to do is figure out how do we convert degree measure that we're used to into this new measure radians. So hopefully you've learned how to convert in science classes and other math classes, but the basic gist of conversion is always multiply by the ratio of the new unit that you're converting into divided by the old unit that you're converting out of. So if I start in degrees and I'm trying to get to radians, I need to multiply by some ratio of degrees to radians where that ratio is equal to 1, so that I'm multiplying by 1 and not changing the value. Well, we just learned that pi radians is equal to 180 degrees. So if I multiply by some number of radians divided by some number of degrees, we see the degrees will cancel and I'll be left with radians. Specifically, I would want to multiply by a ratio that equals 1, and we're seeing that pi radians is exactly equal to 180 degrees. So when I multiply by pi over 180, I will be left with my answer in radians. So, to summarize, this is the important point here. When we're converting from degrees to radians, we'll always multiply by pi over 180. That's our main point for this little section here. If I'm converting from degrees to radians, I will multiply by pi over 180. Let's see an example here. Suppose I have 120 degrees. Okay, we all know what that looks like. And I want to convert it to radians. Okay, always when I'm converting from degrees to radians, I'll multiply it by pi over 180. Again, pi radians is exactly equal to 180 degrees. So if I multiply by those, that's actually 1 when you divide them, and I'm not changing the value. But as I look at this, I'll see that there's a common factor of 60, and I can cancel out that common factor of 60. That leaves 2 behind from the 120, 3 behind from the 180, and 2 times pi is divided by 3, and this is my degree measure, or excuse me, my angle measure in radians. So visually, we can say that if we had an angle that looked like this, we can say that this angle is 120 degrees, or we could say the same angle is 2 pi over 3 radians. The same angle, right? So this is how we convert from degree measure into radian measure. Just look at one or two more here. Suppose we had 30 degrees. We want to convert it into radians. So we're going to convert from degrees to radians. We always, when we're converting from degrees to radians, multiply by pi over 180. So we have 30 degrees times pi over 180. Again, notice the common factor. There's 30. That leaves 1 behind here, 6 behind here. And so our angle is equal to pi over 6. There's no symbol for radians. You don't have to write out radians every time. Anytime you see an angle measure with pi in it, we'll all know that you're talking about radians. So we don't really need to label the unit there. We can just write pi over 6. If you want to, you're welcome to write radians. Okay. So, to summarize, we want to be able to convert from degrees to radians. Whenever we're converting from a degree measure to a radian measure, we will multiply by pi over 180 and then simply reduce the fraction, simplest form, and that is our radian measure for the given angle. You'll practice that a bunch on the homework tonight.